I welcome you all to this news analysis initiative. These are the articles that are important from UPSC perspective. We will start with the first article for the day. Supreme Court tells states to replace distressed BLOs for SIR. Recently, BLOs complained of extreme workload during voter roll revision. Some even collapsed under pressure. The Supreme Court said elections cannot stop, but states must take care of these employees. If someone is stressed or unable to work, the state should replace them or add more staff. Okay. For ethics, this is a classic case of balancing duty with compassion. The election commission has a duty to run fair elections, but the state has an equal duty to protect the dignity and well-being of frontline workers. So the ethical response is simple. Okay, you can use this as your way forward in ethics case studies. Reassign or rotate overburdened BLOs to prevent burnout. Deploy additional manpower to reduce workload spikes. Create a stress management and grievance redressal mechanism. Ensure realistic targets and training for enumeration tasks. Use technology like digital enumeration tools to reduce manual burden. Document issues properly and escalate to higher authorities when workload becomes unsafe. Maintain integrity of the electoral process while ensuring humane treatment of BLOs. The Russian president's visit to India has triggered various developments across defense, energy, trade, and diplomacy. Multiple articles have come out on this, so I have clubbed all the key points together. As the visit progresses and final agreements are announced, we will analyze them in detail. But for now, I will give you a picture of the major issues shaping India Russia relations right at this moment. See, if we look at India Russia ties, they are built on decades of trust, defense, nuclear energy, and political support. But today, the global situation has changed. Western sanctions on Russia, the Ukraine war, and India's growing ties with the US have made this relationship more complex. And Russian President's 2025 visit shows that the partnership is still strong. But India has to walk a very tight rope, that is, balancing both US as well as the Russia. Now, why this relationship matters? The first one, defense remains the backbone. India still depends on Russia for major platforms, S-400 systems, submarines, tanks, jet engines, and importantly, Russia shares high-end defense technology that no other country shares with us. Second, nuclear cooperation is deep. Kudangulam is a big example, and now Russia is offering small modular reactors too. Third, energy and trade have increased. Since the Ukraine war, Russian oil became cheap and India increased imports from less than 2% to nearly 40% of our oil basket. Because of this, India-Russia trade jumped to $68.7 billion in 24-25. So India can't ignore the energy advantages Russia gives us. However, we need to focus on new areas of cooperation like oil and alternative trade. Due to new US sanctions, oil imports may reduce. So both countries are discussing replacing some of the oil trade with Russian commodities and increasing Indian exports through the new Chennai-Vladivostok maritime corridor. Very important from your prelims aspect. Second, labor mobility agreement. A major highlight of this visit is a mobility pact. This will allow Indian workers to work in Russia at a time when many Western countries are tightening visas. Third, Eurasian Economic Union free trade agreement. So both sides are pushing an free trade agreement to diversify trade and reduce over dependence on oil. However, now this relationship is becoming a little bit tricky. Okay, major reason is Western pressure is increasing. The United States and Europe closely watch India's ties with Russia, and oil payments, shipping insurance, and banking channels get complicated every time as the sanctions tighten. And Russia wants trade in national currencies to avoid the dollar risk. While Russian systems are still crucial, India is also buying more from the United States, France, and Israel, and balancing both the sides is a challenge for India now. So, how India is balancing the tightrope? Russia is the only major country willing to share sensitive military technology. Second, affordable Russian oil helped India control inflation. Okay. Third, a complete shift away from Russia may push Moscow closer to China, and which is not in India's interest. And the fourth one, maintaining ties keeps India's foreign policy independent and non aligned. The next article for the day is New Delhi's Relative Isolation, India's Tryst with Terror. This article is written by M.K. Narayanan sir. He is a former director, Intelligence Bureau, and a former National Security Advisor. Okay, and this article is very important. The article is saying that India is facing a tough geopolitical situation right now. Even though India is known for its good diplomacy, at this moment it is not playing a major role in big global issues. Whether it's the conflicts in West Asia, the war in Europe, or tensions in the Indo Pacific, India is mostly watching from the outside and not actively shaping the outcomes. And now the time has come where India needs to rethink its position because it is looking more like an observer than a key global player. The reasons that were pointed out were India's neighborhood turmoil. Almost every South Asian neighbor is in some form of crisis. Afghanistan, Nepal, Maldives, Myanmar, and India's ability to rely on them as friendly partners has reduced significantly. Second, Pakistan, because it has passed the recent 27th Constitutional Amendment Act, creating a new post called Chief of Defense Forces, including full control over nuclear assets. This removes the civilian checks and increases the risk of strategic adventurism. So now India must prepare for the possibility of conflict even if it feels speculative right now. The third one is Bangladesh is turning hostile. On India's eastern flank, the interim government in Bangladesh is seen as unfriendly. And two concerns stand out. First, Bangladesh is warming up to Pakistan, and a Pakistani naval ship visiting Dhaka after 50 years. And this is signaling Pakistan's potential presence in the Bay of Bengal, and which is very strategically sensitive for India. So now India faces hostility and uncertainty from both east and west. The next is the return of urban terror, and this time by the educated professionals. It is the emergence of a new type of terror module involving medical professionals. So, this indicates deep social fault lines, revenge based extremism, and indoctrination happening through professional networks. Also, international linkages. And this is far more dangerous because these are educated, skilled individuals turning to terror. So, the real message of this article is India is simultaneously dealing with external hostility, that is Pakistan and Bangladesh, internal radicalization, regional instability, and global strategic isolation. The next article for the day is A Day to Pause and Come Down to Earth. So, World Soil Day 2025 gave a strong message. If we want healthy cities, we first need healthy soils. We usually think soil matters only in farms, but in reality, even cities survive because of what lies under parks, trees, playgrounds, and green spaces. Okay. First, healthy soils cool our cities. They act like natural air conditioners by absorbing heat and storing carbon, which helps fight climate change and heat waves. Second, they prevent flooding. Unlike concrete that blocks water, good soil works like a sponge, soaking rain, filtering it, and recharging groundwater. Third, they support urban farming and biodiversity. Rooftop gardens, community gardens, and even small home gardens depend on fertile soil. These areas also support insects, worms, and pollinators. Fourth, they improve our well being. Green, soil rich spaces reduce stress, improve mental health, and encourage physical activity. But what are the challenges in cities? Because urban soil is one of the most damaged resources in the cities. Construction compacts the soil, pollution contaminates it, organic matter gets lost, and concrete seals the land, killing the soil life completely. So, what should be the way forward? We need to restore soils with compost, protect open land, expand parks and rain gardens, promote urban farming, and teach people how to manage soil responsibility. Even small actions like home composting can help. So, the core message is if we protect our soils, we automatically protect our cities, our climate, and our own health. The next article for the day is cyber crackdown. In this article, the transnational dimension of cyber crackdown is written. We will look into that. And this is the most important part for UPSC because a lot of cyber operations are no longer run from India but from scam centers in Southeast Asia, especially Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. And these centers are run like modern day slavery sweatshops, and they use trafficked workers, and they are protected by illegal regimes who earn revenue from them. Okay, therefore policing inside India is alone not enough, and now the global cooperation is essential in this means. And there is an example like the US, which has created a scam center strike force. India also need to do something like that. First, we have to work with Asian nations. We have to use UN mechanisms to impose sanctions. We have to pressure illegal regimes that harbor scam syndicates. We have to coordinate data sharing and extradition. And we have to shut down cross border money flows through fintech and crypto channels. So, what must India do? We have to strengthen our cyber policing. We have to increase cyber cells in every district, real time coordination with banks, RBI, and certain. We must also train state police in digital forensics and AI enabled fraud tracking. And we have to build a digitally aware society through mass campaigns in schools, banks, telecom operators, and especially focusing on senior citizens and rural populations. We must also reform our banking protocols. We must bring in strict KYC compliance and AI based early warning systems. And the most important is the international diplomacy. We have to push for joint operation against scam centers. We have to work with Interpol and Asian frameworks. The next article for the day is how the Mahad satyagraha shaped constitutional discourse. Mahad in the old Bombay presidency was a place where Dalits were denied even basic access to public water sources like the Chavada tank. This is where Ambedkar launched one of India's earliest human rights movements. The whole movement actually started because of the Bole resolution of 1923 in the Bombay Legislative Council. And S.K. Bole said that untouchable classes must be allowed to use all public watering places built with public money. Okay, and Ambedkar simply wanted that resolution to be implemented. So, in March 1927, Ambedkar and his followers held the first Mahad Satyagraha, which is 1.0, okay, asserting their right to drink water from the tank. After that, caste Hindus even performed purification rituals, which showed how deep the discrimination was. Then came Mahad 2.0 in December 1927, and courts had put a stay saying the tank was private property. Okay, so Ambedkar did not repeat the water satyagraha. Instead, he burned the Manusmriti, symbolically challenging caste hierarchy. And this moment is also remembered for his call for gender equality, and that's why December 25 is celebrated as Indian Women's Liberation Day. Okay, the next article is US deported 3,258 Indian nationals in 2025. For UPSC, the key point is this is the highest since 2009. Okay. So this becomes a data point showing the scale of irregular migration and the growing concern around student visa issues, border entries, and undocumented stays by Indians. Now, Foreign Minister clarified two sensitive issues. First, the widely reported case of Harjit Kaur, a 73-year-old Indian woman who was allegedly deported in handcuffs. However, he said she was not handcuffed but was maltreated during detention, like deprived of basic facilities and proper food. India has also taken up strongly with US authorities. This highlights India's consular role in protecting the citizens abroad. And the second one is the new US policy, okay, where even minor offenses led to visa cancellations and many students were pressured to self deport. The US has also asked applicants, especially students, to keep their social media accounts public for background checks. The next article is Supreme Court orders 30% reservation for women in state bar councils. The Supreme Court has ordered the Bar Council of India to enforce 30% reservation for women in all state bar council elections, including both elected seats and office bearer post, to address the severe underrepresentation of women and uphold the constitutional principles of equality and representation. This is important from gender justice and women representation. The next article for the day is a minister says 4.8 crore cases are pending in lower courts. Okay. The law minister told parliament that India's judiciary is facing a big structural gap. 4,855 judge vacancies in district and subordinate courts and 297 vacancies in high courts. And this shortage directly leads to the huge pendency of cases. Now, 4.8 crore cases are pending in lower courts. In the Supreme Court, around 90,694 cases are pending as of December 1, 2025, and which is a jump from 70,239 in 2021. Now, the important state-wise figures are Uttar Pradesh has the highest vacancies in lower courts, around 1055 posts. Then Gujarat 535 and Madhya Pradesh 384. Even in the high courts, Allahabad High Court tops with 60 vacancies and also the highest pendency, which is 11.66 lakh cases. And UP's lower courts alone have 1.13 crore pending cases, the highest in the country. The next article for the day is Postal Department considers UPI-like labels for addresses. Okay. Now, what is this, Dhruva? The Postal Department is planning a UPI-like system for addresses called Dhruva, which is Digital Hub for Reference and Unique Virtual Address. Instead of typing long physical addresses everywhere, people can simply share a label like name at entity, similar to a UPI ID, and companies can access the actual address. And this is only with user consent. And this system will rest on DigiPin, which is a 10-character alphanumeric code that pinpoints the location to a 14 square area. And it is mainly built to solve rural and poorly structured address issues. So, the idea is to make address sharing interoperable, digital, secure, and easy, especially for e-commerce, delivery apps, and gig workers. And they have also planned to create an NPCI like not for profit body to run it. We will look into the next article. The Supreme Court has refused to stop the Bareilly demolitions immediately, and two residents had rushed to the Supreme Court saying that UP authorities were carrying out targeted bulldozer action after recent communal clashes and that it violated the court's own 2024 guidelines, which require a show cause notice and 15 days time before any demolition. At the same time, the court told the petitioners that they should first approach the High Court under Article 226 instead of coming directly to the Supreme Court under Article 32. And this shows how judicial federalism works in India. That is, high courts are the first line of protection of citizen rights, and the Supreme Court steps in only when necessary. So now the Supreme Court has balanced the principle of respecting the constitutional role of the high courts. The next article is Supreme Court to review clause in 2025 order that contradicts Assam Accord. Okay. Now, the Supreme Court has asked the centre to respond to a petition challenging Clause 3 of the Immigration and Foreigners Exemption Order 2025. Which actually lets persecuted religious minorities from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh to stay in Assam even if they came without passports up to December 31, 2024. The Assam Gana Parishad says this is unconstitutional because it violates the Assam Accord. Because Assam Accord clearly fixes March 25, 1971 as the cutoff date. Anyone entering Assam after that date must be identified as a foreigner and deported. This cutoff date is also written into Section 6A of the Citizenship Act, which the Supreme Court upheld just last year. Now, the new order legalizes post 1971 illegal immigration, and which defeats the whole purpose of the Assam Accord itself. Okay, because it is protecting the Assamese identity, culture, language, and the demography. The next article for the day is India cuts Russian oil imports by a sharp 38%. See, India has sharply reduced its oil imports from Russia down to 38% in value and 31% in volume in October 2025 compared to the same month last year, that is October 2024. Okay, even with the cuts, Russia still remains India's biggest supplier. About 32% of India's total crude imports still come from Russia, which is very important. At the same time, India has increased oil imports from the US up nearly 40% in volume, and this shows diversification strategy. And this gradual pullback from Russian oil actually started months before the US announced the 25% tariff penalty on India for buying Russian crude. The next article for the day is Worrying Pattern of HIV Transmission in Children. Okay, doctors are increasingly noticing a troubling trend. Some babies are testing positive for HIV even though their mothers tested negative during pregnancy. And this exposes a silent transmission gap in India's HIV prevention system. HIV can pass from mother to child during pregnancy, at the time of delivery, or through breastfeeding. Normally, early antenatal testings and medicines reduce this risk. But the problem is that most women get only one HIV test early in pregnancy. Many of them may acquire HIV later, and early test won't catch it. There is also a window period, that is, the early stage after infection when HIV test may still show negative even though the virus is present. During this time, the mother's viral load is actually very high, making the baby's risk even greater. So, the issue is not failure of treatment for known HIV positive mothers, it is new infections during late pregnancy or breastfeeding that remain undetected due to lack of repeated testing. So, the doctors say what we need is repeat HIV testing in late pregnancy, at delivery, and during breastfeeding, and early testing of infants with follow up when needed. Also, immediate treatment if a baby tests positive. So, closing the silent transmission gap is essential if India and the world want to eliminate HIV in children. The next one is the place in news, which is North Sea. Because Britain and Norway now will mount joint naval patrols to protect undersea cables from Russia. Okay, and especially that is the North Sea. And we have to see the countries that are bordering the North Sea. They are United Kingdom, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. Also Germany. That's all for today. Thank you all for joining.